The Bren gun's empty magazine hits the mud with a metallic clank that echoes across the Dutch farmyard like a church bell marking the end of prayer. Jake McNiece crouches behind the overturned cart, his hands still trembling from the recoil, watching German reinforcements pour from motorcycles and half-tracks. The weight of the weapon feels different now, useless metal instead of salvation. 60 meters away, Corporal McGee signals frantically from the barn's collapsed wall, pointing toward the drainage ditch that leads to the tree line. The civilians are gone, vanished into the farmhouse like smoke. 8 Wehrmacht soldiers lie scattered across the courtyard, their field-grey uniforms darker where blood pools beneath them. McNiece tries not to look at their faces as he abandons the Bren gun and sprints toward his squadmates, boots slipping in the October mud of Operation Market Garden's dying days. 3 hours later, they're back in American lines, reporting to a tired captain who marks German positions on his map with mechanical precision. The intelligence officer shows no interest in civilian rescues. His war exists in grid squares and enemy strength estimates, not in the memory of an old Dutchman shielding a child with his body. McNiece sits on an ammunition crate in the bombed church that serves as their temporary command post, cleaning mud from his rifle while McGee explains patrol routes to replacement paratroopers. "You know what happens if anyone talks about this morning," McGee says quietly, settling beside him. "Court-martial for disobeying patrol orders, engaging superior forces without authorization, compromising the mission." McNiece lights a cigarette with hands that haven't stopped shaking. The flame illuminates his mud-caked face, highlighting eyes that have seen too much in too few months since D-Day. Around them, other paratroopers from the 506th PIR maintain weapons, write letters, and try to forget the sound of artillery that's been constant background music since they dropped into Holland 3 weeks ago. "Some things are worth the risk, Corporal," McNiece finally responds, his Oklahoma drawl roughened by exhaustion and cigarette smoke. But even as he says it, McNiece knows the weight of those words. Worth the risk to whom? The Dutch civilians are safe, scattered to relatives in villages the Germans haven't swept yet. His squad made it back intact, carrying intelligence about Wehrmacht patrol patterns and defensive positions. The Bren gun lies abandoned in that farmyard, another piece of equipment lost to hasty tactical decisions that field manuals specifically prohibit. In the morning, they'll receive new orders. Push north toward Arnhem, where British paratroopers are reportedly surrounded and running low on ammunition. Probe German defenses along the canal line, where Wehrmacht units have established killing fields across the flat Dutch countryside. The radio crackles with reports of failed link-ups, misdropped supplies, and bridges that change hands every few hours like poker chips in a desperate game. McNiece studies the faces of his fellow paratroopers in the dim candlelight. Young men who joined the army to fight fascism, trained to jump from airplanes and hold ground until relieved, now discovering that war is mostly mud, fear, and impossible choices made by exhausted men with insufficient information. The Filthy 13's reputation for insubordination and effectiveness has followed them from Normandy to Holland, but tonight it feels more like a burden than a badge of honor. "Think they'll remember us?" asked Private Janovec, nodding toward the farmhouse where they'd left the civilians. "They'll remember," McNiece says, flicking his cigarette into the darkness beyond the church's broken walls. "Whether they remember us as liberators or just another group of foreign soldiers who brought violence to their doorstep remains to be seen." The candle gutters in a draught that carries the smell of smoke, wet wool, and cordite. Scents that will follow these men long after the war ends, triggered by unexpected moments in peaceful American towns they can't yet imagine returning to. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation. And stay with us for the next chapters. Dawn breaks grey and cold over the Dutch countryside, revealing the true scope of Operation Market Garden's unraveling. McNiece and his patrol receive orders to advance north along the Canal Road, probing German defences that have had 3 weeks to dig in and register their artillery. The mission briefing is delivered by a lieutenant who looks barely old enough to shave, reading from typewritten pages that describe enemy positions with mathematical precision that bears no resemblance to the chaotic reality beyond their lines. Intelligence indicates light resistance along the approach routes, the lieutenant announces to a dozen paratroopers crammed into the church's stone vestry. Wehrmacht units are reportedly withdrawing toward prepared positions near Arnhem. Your patrol will advance by bounds, report enemy contact and withdraw to relay intelligence. McNiece exchanges glances with Magee. Light resistance. The same phrase that preceded yesterday's encounter with a full Wehrmacht patrol conducting anti-partisan sweeps. In 3 weeks of fighting through Dutch towns and flooded polders, he's learned that intelligence reports describe a different war than the one visible through a rifle sight. The patrol moves out at 0600, following drainage ditches and farm roads that wind between fields flooded by German demolitions. McNiece carries his M1 Garand and a canvas satchel containing 6 blocks of TNT, detonation cord, and blasting caps. Standard demolition kit for a sergeant in the 506 PIR's demolition section. The explosives weigh 12 pounds, but they've become as familiar as his helmet and rifle, tools for a war where bridges, culverts, and road junctions determine whether tank columns can advance or infantry can retreat. 2 kilometers north of their starting position, the patrol encounters the first sign that intelligence estimates are optimistic fiction. Fresh tank tracks in the mud, leading toward a stone bridge that spans the canal. German engineers have reinforced the structure with steel girders and concrete barriers, transforming a simple farm crossing into a fortified position that commands the entire approach route. "That's not light resistance," mutters Private Liebgott, studying the bridge through binoculars. "That's a fucking fortress." Wehrmacht soldiers move purposefully around prepared positions on both sides of the canal. Machine gun nests cover every approach route, while mortar crews occupy concealed positions in farm buildings that provide perfect observation over the flooded fields. The bridge itself bristles with defensive improvements. Steel plates welded to stone parapets, firing ports cut through the structure's walls, and what appears to be a demolition chamber prepared beneath the roadway. McNiece counts at least 30 German soldiers visible in defensive positions, with unknown numbers concealed in buildings and bunkers. The patrol's mission assumes they'll encounter scattered outposts and withdrawn units, not a reinforced company dug in around a key crossing point. Standard operating procedure calls for immediate withdrawal to report contact with superior forces. We head back, Magee decides. Report what we've seen, and let somebody else figure out how to deal with it. But as the patrol prepares to withdraw, McNiece notices something that makes him hesitate. German supply vehicles moving across the bridge in both directions, carrying ammunition boxes and what appears to be wounded soldiers evacuated from forward positions. The bridge isn't just a defensive position, it's a critical supply route for Wehrmacht units fighting further north against British paratroopers. The TNT satchel feels heavier as McNiece considers possibilities that violate every rule about patrol missions and chain of command. 6 blocks of explosive, properly placed, could drop the center span and cut German supply lines for days. But attacking the bridge would require his 4-man patrol to assault a reinforced position, hold it long enough to place charges, and somehow escape across open ground swept by machine gun fire. "McNasty," Magee says quietly, recognizing the look on his sergeant's face. "Don't even think about it." McNiece shoulders the satchel and starts moving toward the tree line that offers concealment for a closer approach to the German positions. Sometimes the right tactical decision isn't the one described in field manuals written by men who've never crawled through Dutch mud while Wehrmacht mortars search for American paratroopers. The approach takes 2 hours of careful movement through drainage ditches filled with brackish water that smells of diesel fuel and decay. McNiece leads his patrol through the flooded fields surrounding the bridge, using farm buildings and hedgerows for concealment, while German sentries maintain their watch over the canal crossing. The TNT satchel bounces against his back with each step, a reminder of possibilities that grow more dangerous as they move closer to Wehrmacht positions. From a concealed position in an abandoned barn, the patrol observes German defensive preparations that confirm McNiece's worst fears about their mission parameters. The Wehrmacht company has transformed the bridge approach into an integrated killing zone, with overlapping fields of fire that would shred any frontal assault within seconds. Machine gun positions cover every route across the flooded ground, while mortar crews maintain communication with forward observers who can adjust fire onto any target within range. Count 40-plus soldiers, Medji whispers, studying enemy positions through field glasses. Plus, whatever's in the buildings we can't see. This isn't a patrol mission anymore, Mac. This is suicide. But McNiece's attention focuses on the bridge's structural details, analyzing how 6 blocks of TNT might be placed to achieve maximum effect against the reinforced stone and steel construction. The Wehrmacht engineers have done their work well. Steel girders support the roadway, while concrete reinforcements protect against small arms fire. Demolishing the structure would require precise placement of charges against load-bearing elements, probably beneath the center span, where explosives would be most effective. Radio communication with their command post produces frustrating delays and garbled transmission that reflect the chaos of Market Garden's deteriorating situation. When contact is finally established, the news confirms what every paratrooper in Holland already knows. The operation is collapsing, British forces at Arnhem are surrounded, and German counterattacks are cutting Allied supply lines throughout the region. All patrols are ordered to withdraw to prepared positions, the radio operator reports. No offensive action without explicit authorization from regimental command. McNiece stares at the bridge, watching German supply vehicles continue their regular movement between Wehrmacht positions. Each truck carries ammunition, medical supplies, and reinforcements that will be used against British paratroopers who are running low on everything except courage and stubbornness. The tactical situation is clear. Destroying the bridge would disrupt German operations and potentially save Allied lives, but it would also violate direct orders and risk 4 American lives in an unauthorized attack. "We follow orders," Medji says firmly. "Report what we've seen and let the brass decide how to handle it." Private Janovec nods agreement, his rifle trained on German positions that could kill them all if their concealment fails. The smart choice is withdrawal, followed by a detailed intelligence report that describes enemy strength and defensive preparations. Some other unit, properly equipped and reinforced, can attack the bridge when higher command determines the tactical benefits justify the costs. But McNiece remembers the sound of British voices on yesterday's radio traffic requesting ammunition resupply and medical evacuation for wounded paratroopers surrounded in Arnhem. He thinks about Wehrmacht supply trucks carrying the tools of war to German units fighting against men who jumped from the same aircraft, trained at the same fields, and swore the same oaths to complete the mission regardless of personal cost. The TNT satchel contains enough explosive power to drop the bridge's center span, but carrying it forward means abandoning the tactical caution that keeps small patrols alive in enemy territory. McNiece's hands check the detonation cord and blasting caps, while his mind calculates approach routes, placement requirements, and escape possibilities that all depend on German mistakes and American luck. "What would you do?" he asks Medji quietly. "If you knew those supply trucks were carrying ammunition that'll kill British paratroopers tomorrow, would you follow the orders exactly? Or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take, and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. McNiece moves without consulting his patrol, rising from concealment with the TNT satchel clutched against his chest like a prayer book. The decision crystallizes in the space between heartbeats. Sometimes a sergeant's judgment matters more than a colonel's orders, especially when German supply trucks carry death to surrounded paratroopers who depend on American initiative to survive another day. "Mac, what the hell are you doing?" Magee hisses, but McNiece is already moving toward the drainage ditch that leads closest to the bridge's supporting structure. The approach requires 30 meters of open ground, covered by at least 2 machine gun positions that sweep the canal bank with overlapping fire. McNiece low crawls through mud and standing water, using destroyed farm equipment for concealment, while German voices echo from defensive positions above. The TNT blocks dig into his ribs with each forward movement, their weight distributed across his back in a canvas satchel that wasn't designed for tactical operations. 20 meters from the bridge, McNiece pauses behind the rusted hulk of a farm truck to study his target's structural details. The Wehrmacht engineers have done professional work. Steel reinforcements support the original stone construction, while concrete barriers provide additional protection against Allied artillery. But the center pier remains vulnerable, a stone foundation that carries the bridge's full weight across the canal's narrow span. German voices grow louder as supply vehicles rumble across the roadway overhead, their weight causing small vibrations that McNiece feels through the ground beneath his chest. 6 blocks of TNT, properly placed against the pier's base, should generate enough force to collapse the center span and close the crossing for weeks. But placing charges requires getting beneath the bridge's roadway, where German sentries maintain visual contact with anyone approaching the structure. The sound of approaching footsteps freezes McNiece against the truck's rusted frame. A Wehrmacht soldier appears at the canal bank, rifle slung casually across his shoulder, moving with the relaxed confidence of a man performing routine security checks in supposedly secure territory. The German is young, perhaps 19, with mud-stained boots and a field jacket that's seen weeks of Dutch weather. McNiece's hand moves to his combat knife while his mind calculates distances, reaction times, and the noise that would accompany any violent encounter. Killing the sentry would eliminate immediate discovery, but alert other German positions when the soldier fails to report. Avoiding contact means accepting the risk that his movement toward the bridge might be observed and reported through Wehrmacht communication networks. The German soldier pauses 3 meters away, lighting a cigarette, while studying the canal water that reflects grey October sky. McNiece holds his breath, feeling TNT blocks press against his spine while his heart pounds loud enough to wake the dead. The moment stretches like detonation cord pulled tight, ready to explode into violence or fade into memory depending on factors beyond any American sergeant's control. After what feels like hours, the Wehrmacht soldier flicks his cigarette into the canal and moves back toward defensive positions, his boots squelching in mud that muffles sound and movement. McNiece exhales slowly, then resumes his approach to the bridge pier, where 6 blocks of explosive wait to be transformed from potential energy into strategic impact. Placing the charges requires 15 minutes of careful work beneath the bridge's stone foundation, fingers moving by touch and memory, while German boots stamp overhead. McNiece uses det cord to link individual TNT blocks, creating a demolition chain that will concentrate explosive force against the pier's most vulnerable points. The fusing system is simple, a single blasting cap connected to 30 seconds of safety fuse, enough time to clear the immediate blast area if everything works according to plan. But as McNiece prepares to light the fuse, he hears something that changes everything. British voices on a German radio, captured transmission from surrounded paratroopers requesting immediate medical evacuation for wounded soldiers who can't be moved without assistance. The captured radio transmission stops McNiece's hand inches from the safety fuse, British accents pleading for medical supplies and ammunition resupply that won't come because every crossing point between German and Allied lines has been fortified or destroyed. Those voices belong to paratroopers like himself, men who jumped into Holland expecting quick victory and found themselves trapped in a grinding battle of attrition that's consuming entire units in pursuit of objectives that no longer seem achievable. McNiece crouches beneath the bridge with 6 blocks of TNT positioned against structural supports, listening to Wehrmacht soldiers translate intercepted Allied communications. The German voices sound tired, professional, lacking the triumphant tone of soldiers winning decisive victories. They're reading coordinates, casualty reports, and supply requests that paint a picture of British desperation, but also German exhaustion after 3 weeks of continuous fighting. What the after-action reports would never record, McNiece's hand trembling as he holds the unlit safety fuse, paralyzed by the realization that destroying this bridge might cut German supply lines, but would also eliminate any possibility of medical evacuation for British wounded. The Wehrmacht trucks carry ammunition and reinforcements forward, but they also carry wounded soldiers rearward to aid stations where German medics treat injuries without regard for uniform or nationality. 30 seconds, he whispers to himself, calculating the time between ignition and detonation. 30 seconds to crawl 20 meters to cover, then watch the center span collapse into canal water that reflects October sky like broken mirror. The demolition would achieve its tactical objective, disrupting German logistics and forcing Wehrmacht units to find alternate routes for supply operations. But those same 30 seconds would also trap wounded British paratroopers on the wrong side of the canal, cut off from evacuation routes that might mean the difference between survival and death. McNiece stares at the blasting cap that will transform potential energy into kinetic destruction, his mind caught between tactical necessity and moral consequence that no field manual addresses. Above him, German voices continue their professional discussion of Allied positions, casualty estimates, and defensive preparations. The Wehrmacht soldiers sound like mechanics diagnosing engine problems, methodical, thorough, focused on technical solutions to tactical challenges. They're fighting the same war as American paratroopers, just from the opposite direction, trapped in the same grinding machinery of strategic decisions made by men who will never crawl through Dutch mud or listen to wounded soldiers plead for medical attention. The truth McNiece carries for the rest of his life. He lights the fuse, not because destroying the bridge serves clear tactical purpose, but because 30 seconds of certainty feels better than hours of paralyzed indecision. Sometimes action becomes its own justification, regardless of consequence or strategic impact. The safety fuse hisses to life, sparking and smoking as it burns toward the blasting cap that will detonate 6 blocks of TNT against the bridge's stone foundation. McNiece crawls frantically toward the drainage ditch, counting seconds while German voices continue overhead, unaware that their strategic crossing point is about to disappear in a cloud of smoke and falling debris. 28 seconds. 25, 20... The explosion feels like an earthquake, lifting McNiece from the ground and slamming him back down, while stone fragments rain across the canal bank. The center span collapses with a grinding roar that drowns out German shouts and vehicle engines. When the smoke clears, 30 meters of roadway lies broken in the canal water, and the Wehrmacht's supply route has become an impassable gap that will require engineers and construction equipment to repair. But as McNiece crawls toward his patrol's position, he hears something that will haunt his dreams for decades. British voices on the German radio, still requesting medical evacuation that can no longer reach them through the crossing point he just destroyed. The patrol's withdrawal becomes a nightmarish scramble through flooded fields, while Wehrmacht units search for the demolition team that destroyed their primary supply route. German voices echo across the Dutch countryside, coordinating pursuit operations and security sweeps designed to capture American paratroopers who violated every protocol about patrol missions and tactical restraint. McNiece and his 3 squad mates move through drainage ditches filled with brackish water, using farm buildings and hedgerows for concealment, while artillery searchlights probe their escape routes. They reach American lines 6 hours later, exhausted and mud-caked, reporting to the same tired captain who marks their intelligence on maps that already show too many German positions and not enough Allied solutions. The bridge demolition is recorded as enemy action, Wehrmacht engineers presumably destroying their own crossing point to deny it to advancing Allied forces. No mention of unauthorized offensive action by an American patrol acting without orders or support. "Good work," the captain says absently, focused on radio reports that describe continued German pressure against British positions near Arnhem. "Intelligence confirms the bridge is down. That should slow their logistics operation for a few days." But McNiece knows better. German engineers will have the crossing operational within 48 hours, using pontoon bridges or temporary spans that might actually provide better tactical flexibility than the original stone structure. The demolition achieved temporary disruption at the cost of permanent moral weight that settles into his chest, like shrapnel that can't be extracted by field surgeons. 3 weeks later, Operation Market Garden officially ends with Allied withdrawal south of the Rhine River. The strategic objectives, capturing bridges and establishing a corridor into Germany, remain unfulfilled, leaving British paratroopers at Arnhem surrounded and eventually forced to surrender or escape on foot through German lines. The official history will describe tactical failures and logistical challenges, but not the sound of wounded soldiers requesting medical evacuation through radio channels monitored by exhausted men who make split-second decisions with incomplete information. McNiece receives a commendation for outstanding service during reconnaissance operations, a Bronze Star that joins other medals he doesn't wear and citations he doesn't read. The Filthy 13's reputation grows with each action, transforming desperate improvisation into legendary fearlessness that makes good stories for war correspondents and military historians. But legend carries different weight than memory, and the stories people want to hear rarely include the parts that keep soldiers awake decades after the shooting stops. If this story reminded you that behind every medal and mission report there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story. 40 years later, McNiece stands on a reconstructed bridge in Holland, surrounded by Dutch civilians who've gathered to honor American paratroopers who liberated their country during the war. Children place flowers at a memorial plaque that lists the names of soldiers killed during Market Garden, while elderly survivors share stories about young Americans who jumped from airplanes and fought German occupation with weapons, explosives, and stubborn courage that couldn't be defeated by tactical failure. An old Dutch man approaches McNiece, studying the paratrooper insignia on his veteran's cap with recognition that transcends language barriers. The civilian speaks broken English, describing his family's rescue by American soldiers who violated orders to engage Wehrmacht units conducting anti-partisan sweeps. 8 German soldiers died in a farmyard firefight, but Dutch families survived to rebuild lives and communities that the war had tried to destroy. "You were there?" the old man asks, gesturing toward fields that once flooded with German demolitions and echoed with artillery fire. McNiece nods, his hands steady now, but still carrying the weight of decisions made by exhausted men with insufficient information and too much responsibility. The Bren gun he abandoned in that farmyard has become part of the story people tell about American liberation. But the bridge he destroyed remains his private memory, along with British voices requesting medical evacuation that never came. "Some things were worth the risk," he says quietly, lighting a cigarette while watching children play near the memorial that honors men who died believing their sacrifice served clear tactical purpose. The old Dutchman smiles and pats McNiece's shoulder, a gesture that carries gratitude across decades and languages. But as the ceremony ends and families return to peaceful lives, McNiece remains beside the memorial, smoking and thinking about the difference between stories people need to hear and truths that soldiers carry alone. The TNT satchel he carried that October morning weighs nothing now, but its moral weight will follow him until he joins the names carved in stone memorials that mark places where young men made impossible choices with consequences that echo longer than explosions.